Okay, time to begin.
We are starting now?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Our webinar is organized by the European chapter. Today is about a topic very profound, very important, because in this period so polarized in the world, where there are many wars around the world, and so there are many people engaged in this condition and they suffer. We want to maintain our work as professional for eating disorder, for mental health in general, and to help this kind of people to face their strong stress and the hurt they receive by the war. Today, there's Mikkel Hazen-Rosenstein that treat this kind of topic, social trauma and eating disorder and mental health. We are learning by her and the group they work with her very much, because there are many people around the world that suffer for the same reason, even if they are in other part of the world, but also if they aren't inside the field of the world, they live day by day by the media, the strongest confrontation. And so the young people, the whole people are afraid, and it reflects, and this is a cause for the mental health and for eating disorder. And so today we are with Mikkel Hazen. She's the president of the society, the Professional Society of Israel. Remember, Israel is part of the Europe. This is the reason because we want to listen by Mikkel. Even if, as professional, we want to reflect for everybody that suffer because the wars around the world, and also in the world nowadays that are in the theater of Israel and in Gaza. We want to reflect for everybody listening and learning by the experience of Mikkel. Mikkel, she's a clinical psychologist. I repeat, she's the president of the Israeli Eating Disorder Society. And so, Mikkel, thanks to your presentation, I'm sure that for everybody of us today is a very important lesson.
Thank you, Umberto. It's very exciting to be here and speak to you about my personal experience and our experience in the war now. I have to say that my presentation is not only based on the war in Israel right now, but also the experience from other wars. I also talked to some of my colleagues that supported and had support groups for women from Ukraine this summer and from other wars around the world. So there are similar elements in wars, and eventually we have to deal with it. It doesn't matter on which side you are, we all suffer from the war, and it affects us emotionally, and it affects everyone. So I will present my presentation, and I'll just say something in Hebrew now for people in Israel, that we have אזעקה מוקלטת, לא לרוץ למקלט.
You can say it also in English, so people will understand where we are. You should say it.
We will experience it in the presentation.
Okay.
Just for you that experience it anyway, so you don't need the presentation to experience it. So I hope it will work. And if there is a problem with my presentation, just let me know. Okay, so we will talk about social trauma. I will present some of my own experience and feelings, and also surveys that we did here. This is how it starts. Just out of the blue. You just sit at home and you hear this alarm. And you know you have to run to a shelter because something is going to happen. So on one day, just everything is different. Everything changes. You lose the ability to feel safe. Just walk on the street. You can't feel safe when you walk on the street because you can have an alarm and you have to lie on the ground or find a shelter, and you only have a few seconds to do that. So you lose the ability to feel safe. You lose the ability to go on with your life. Everything is different. You can't go to work, you can't go to school, or maybe you can go to work or you have to go to work, but it is all different. Sometimes you feel that everything is meaningless because you're afraid on your life. So other things are not that important anymore. Anxiety is very, very high for everyone. I don't know how you felt just to listen to those 5 seconds of alarm, but it is not fun. So what do you do on those first days? There is no protocol, but we did learn something. We had to do something on the first day. We didn't know how, we didn't know where, but it was totally lose of sense of time. It felt like this first day lasted for a week. I think about what I did on the first day. It was so much. It was grief and fear and sadness that won't go away. On the 3rd day of the war, I went to a funeral with my daughters who lost a friend. And I didn't think I have to go with my teenage daughters to a funeral, but I did. They say you can get used to everything, but you can't do it. You can't get used to the sound of alarm. You can't get used to running to a shelter or lie on the ground. And you can, maybe you can get used to go to funerals. I don't know about that yet. And it is really hard because places that are supposed to be safe are not safe anymore, especially hospitals. Hospitals are always chosen as a target. You can see that hospitals are a target in every war. So here you can see a picture. It's not such a good picture, but it is a picture from Barzilai Hospital in Ashkelon. They actually have an eating disorder unit that they closed on the same day because they couldn't work there. The hospital became a target, and it was very dangerous to go there. So what we did do in the first days, it was a mess. We understood that we have to do something because anxiety was all over. A lot of people, we didn't know what happened with them. We didn't know what to do. So many people had to leave their house in a few hours and they couldn't go back. A lot of people were traumatized on the same day, and we were at the same position as therapists. We felt as refugees. Till now, we have about 300,000 people that had to leave their house and actually evacuated, and they can't go back. I know the feeling. I did not have to evacuate this time, but I did it 2006. I had to leave my house for 4 weeks because of the war. So I know how it feels. So most of them were evacuated to hotel, and maybe it sounds nice to be in hotel, but it's not so nice if you're a family of 5 and you have a room for 2 and you have children and pets and nothing but their clothes, just what they wore on the same day, trying to find out who was killed, who was injured, and who was kidnapped. I work with some of them. Not for eating disorder, just for trauma. And I have to say that it's been 4 months and they are still traumatized. They still don't know what to do now. They don't know how to rebuild their life. They can't go back to their house. They can't go back to their city. They can't go back to school. They can't go back to work. And some of them still don't know what happened to the relatives. I work with a woman whose father is kidnapped and she doesn't know what's going on with him. And she can't do anything but think about it. So I start from the position. This picture is from Corona time, but we still feel that. Like as therapists, we don't know what to do. We feel like our patients. We're anxiety, we have some uncertainty, we don't know what to do. I ran a survey among eating disorder professionals in Israel to check how many of them were directly influenced by the event. And we found out that 53.8% of ED professionals in Israel were directly affected. Directly affected means that they had to leave their house, maybe they lost some relatives, maybe they were injured. Unfortunately, we had 2 social workers that were murdered. We had a lot of people who couldn't go to work because they were evacuated. One psychologist was kidnapped. She came back with her children, but without her husband. So we actually felt it, all of us. You can see that we are just like our patients. I can say that 73% live and work in areas that are at risk for regular attacks, which means most of the therapists have to keep working knowing that they can hear this alarm any minute. They have to go to shelter with a patient. I actually heard one of my friends saying that she had to go to the shelter with a patient and she had an anxiety attack and her patient had to calm her down because she couldn't do anything. So it's really hard to keep functioning and being professional in this condition, but we do support each other. We do have a lot of support group and we talk to each other and we learn from each other. So under these conditions, we began taking care of the patients. Eviatar Michaelis, he is a psychologist, and he was one of the first psychologists going to those evacuation centers, refugee centers in the hotels, most of them in Eilat, and he wrote a paper about it, and he described what happened. So he said as an emergency reaction, a lot of therapists or people who call themselves therapists just show up and started working with people were walking around the hotel and they didn't know where they are or who they lost. And a lot of other, we don't know if they're therapists or not because they just came and started talking to them. We also opened a free line to consult and emergency WhatsApp group, but we had a problem because on the first day, every group we opened was attacked by hackers. So we found out that even if we trust the internet and we trust our phone and we trust our groups, we can't trust them anymore because we don't know who's in the group and who attacks it. So we had to find other ways to connect. We called each other, we checked each other, no one trusted anyone. I don't think we could even sleep more than 2 or 3 hours or eat. And even if we don't have any eating disorders, we couldn't eat or that we ate too much. It was very hard. I can tell that the treatment center, eating disorder treatment centers, you can say that 40% were temporarily closed because it wasn't safe to open them. We had to release patients to go home. And only 17% did not change their capacity. Some of them tried to help others, so you can see that the places that were not attacked did enlarge their capacity, but not enough because they can only receive like 2 or 3 patients, but we had hundreds that couldn't get any treatment for a while. I can say that only 2 weeks ago, Barzilai Hospital opened their services again. They did open a little bit before, but only 2 weeks ago they came back to work because until then roads were unsafe. I can say that in the north of Israel, There are 2 treatment centers that still work in low capacity because they only take in people that must go in the hospital. If they are not in an emergency mode, they just tell them go home and wait until it's safer. All hospitals went into emergency mode. We'll release patient as soon as possible. So the effect on ED, some of it is from my survey and some of it is from information we got from Ukraine. So we have the emotional triggers, especially sexual abuse, which is terrible. Using rape as a weapon is common in wars, and it is terrible. And every time you are exposed to it, you just don't know how to even manage it, because just seeing it or hearing it, people that were previously abused, it is very hard for them. We can't take this look out of our minds. We can't stop thinking about it. So just imagine what happened to a girl with complex PTSD who was sexual abused, and now she has to hear about it in the news, and she is exposed to it, and it brings everything back. We also have losses. A lot of our patients lost friends, lost relatives, so they are also grieving. And we have the general anxiety, as I said, that is all over. What we saw in eating disorders was first a change in familiarity. People changed their house, they had to move away. A lot of people who stayed in their house, they hosted friends or family that had to leave their house. So it wasn't the regular environment. People were hosting, having their family and having friends at the house. And for a woman with eating disorder or a girl with eating disorder, it is very hard because there are other people in her house, other people touching her food, other people seeing her. There was damage to the daily routine. If there is no school or no work or no home, you can't maintain any routine, and it is very hard. The availability of food is different. It is not that we don't have food. In this case, our condition is probably better than many other places in the world that have more problems with food supply, but the availability of food is lower. And if someone is used to a certain food, maybe she won't find this certain food in the supermarket because we don't have it anymore, or we don't know when we will have it again. So she has to take different food, and this is not the food she is very regular, and she may not want to eat that because this is not what she's used to do. So it is also affecting. We did some open webinars from people with eating disorders and their families. We had in each one of them between 120 to 150 participants. It was mandatory by a psychiatrist, psychologist, social worker, and a dietitian. And we had some common issues, like the effect on anxiety on food, the daily routine changes, the presence of familiar people. People asked how to maintain the establishment of treatment while treatment has suddenly stopped. We heard about changes in the environment. One of the stories we heard from a woman in this webinar, she said that she is about 20 years old, and she and her family had to go to her hotel because her house was attacked and they can't go back there. You can see here a picture of how it looks like with the family sitting in the hotel. This is an activity for children. But this young lady just shared this information, and she said, I can't eat. I usually eat breakfast with my mother, and she sees what I eat, and she puts the food in my plate, and I can't eat without her. But now I can't eat at all because my mother is busy, because my brother-in-law was murdered and his sister is kidnapped, and my mother is busy with them, and I feel so guilty that everything is so terrible, and all I can think about is that I can't eat an egg in the morning because egg is scary. And she said, okay, this is terrible. My eating disorder is not going anywhere. Life has changed. We've lost relatives. Everything is anxiety and everything is so terrible. And I still can't eat my breakfast if my mother doesn't sit next to me. And she felt very bad about herself, but it didn't help because she felt more and more guilty. And when she feels so much guilt, she can't eat. So she just got worse. All we can tell them is just try to continue. Try to continue do what you used to do. Maybe you should talk to your mother, and maybe you should ask her to sit with you when you eat, because otherwise you just don't eat. And we had a lot of stories like that. We had stories about, I personally treated a woman who had to escape her house, seeing a lot of bodies all around on the road, and she couldn't stop thinking about them. Every place she went, she just thought, okay, so many bodies, and she couldn't drive anymore because she was afraid to go on the road, because every time she went into the car, she imagined all the bodies on the road. And she couldn't go to treatment because she couldn't drive anymore. And she felt stuck. We actually started this treatment on the phone because she couldn't even see me. Everything was so scary. It took her a while until she could open a video and then try to sit in the car. She still cannot drive. We are only doing a video treatment, even though she is in a safe place now. Every time she gets into the car, she has these flashbacks. But we do try to maintain some treatment. So we can say that there were also new requests for treatment, that it was affected. You can see here that I asked them to report about changes in requests for treatment at the beginning of the war and 3 months later. And we also tested it in a different risk areas. I did it by percents because it's easier to see it like that, because there are more people in a medium risk area than in very high risk area, but you can see that there were changes. You can see that the high risk area had a decrease in request, but after 3 months, you can see less requests, maybe because the center was closed, so people just stopped calling. At the medium risk area, you can see that also at the beginning of the war, it didn't change much, but after 3 months, you can see that something did change a little bit. They have more requests. More people reported that they had more requests for treatment because they could go to treatment, if I can say, in the beginning of the war, even if they asked for treatment, they couldn't get it. And we had the alert routine area, and you can see that in the alert routine area, something happened. Less people asked for treatment at the beginning of the war because I think, I don't know, but I can guess that it can happen because they felt so guilty and so busy worrying about others. They were not in risk themselves because they only live in alert routine area, means areas that were not regularly attacked. So people felt pretty much safe and could continue with their life, but they did not go for treatment. They were so busy and saying, okay, everyone is so busy, all mental health professionals are now so busy, I can't interrupt them with my own eating disorder. After 3 months, you can see it change. And they got used to it, and now we see more and more requests for treatment. I also asked in the survey about changes in symptoms. And you can see that in the high-risk area, there was a significant aggregation at the beginning of the ward and only a slight after 3 months. So they do feel worse. No one got improved in this area. Some of them did not change. I will explain later why I think they did not change. At the medium risk area, you also see a slight aggregation, and the same you can see in the alert routine. Again, people that were not directly hurt did suffer more of their symptoms of eating disorders. Some of them had a lot of guilt, and they felt that something terrible happened to others, and they need to punish themselves by not eating. We are all eating disorder people, so I guess you can understand that. Some of them did not experience any change. I have to say, I work in a psychiatric hospital, and some people are so psychotic that nothing matters, or pretty much nothing. They stay in their own routine. Sometimes it does affect them. But also in eating disorder, when the disorder is very difficult and they have very high symptoms, it is so strong that external reality does not affect the internal situation. I could see people in the beginning of the war, they didn't care about alarms. They didn't care about anything. They only cared because their cottage cheese that they used to eat is not in the supermarket. It is not available. So they were very, very worried about it. They didn't care. One of them also told me, okay, I heard the alarm, but I kept going on the street. I don't care. Maybe I'll die. Maybe it's better this way. So I have to say that their symptoms pretty much stay the same. We had a lot of relapse. I had a lot of calls from patients who were already recovered, and I didn't hear from them for 2 years, and now they called, and they have severe symptoms. They feel so anxious, and they feel that they have lost all control, and when they lose a sense of control, they go back to their symptoms. Because if I can't control anything, at least I will control my body. I can choose if I want to eat, and I can choose if I lose control over my eating, and I can throw up. And then I feel it's my safe place. The eating disorder is my safe place when everything else is not. Guilt and flashbacks of sexual trauma were the main triggers. People who said, okay, I just can't eat. Everything is so terrible. I feel so guilty. I can't help. And the other thing, as I said before, were flashbacks of sexual abuse. And unfortunately, we still have that because the media didn't show us everything at the beginning. And they show every time another testimony, another picture, another video. So this is a continuous trauma. I have to say that as therapists, we also have a secondary trauma just from hearing stories. I will not share all the stories with you, but we do hear terrible stories. Like the story I said, okay, I'm driving and the road is full of bodies. Now we anticipate treatment centers that return to work do report more new patients. Centers that did not return to full capacity don't even make waiting lists, since we don't know when it will be possible to accept them. So what's next? It is hard to stay optimistic, I have to say, when you feel heartbroken and threatened and you can't feel safe. And if therapy is about creating a safe environment, now we have to be very creative to create safe zone, even for a short time, even just for now. I did sum up some recommendations, some of them from Evyatar Michaelis' work and some of what I collected from colleagues in the survey. So I think if you want to be prepared, because as I said, the war is a very radical place now, and maybe you don't know when it's going to meet you. So prepare a list of qualified therapists and their location. One of our main problems was that people just showed up to treat other people, even though they were not therapists at all. and they created more damage than help. So I think it can be very useful if we have a list of qualified therapists and you can call them. Don't trust new WhatsApp groups. It is not safe to use them. As I said, hackers. Short seminars for reaction to acute stress reaction. We had a lot of them in the first few weeks. I do recommend that maybe all mental health therapists have these seminars once in a while, like maybe every 2 years, just a short seminar to remember what to do when you find acute stress reaction. Make list of patients that can be released in short notice, because the hospital had to release a lot of patients, so we had to decide who to release and who has to stay. So maybe you should keep that in mind. Make list of alternative treatment center and their capacity, because if you have to evacuate the hospital, it is nice to know that you have another place they can go. You don't always have that option, but if you do, it's nice to know that there is an alternative treatment center. Make sure that people know what they are expected to do in the case of emergency. Notice that regular communication tools may be attacked. So people should know where to go and what they have to do, because when it's emergency time, you don't always have the option to tell them. Keep food and medication supply, especially for eating disorders, because if there are no supply, it's very, very hard for them. For patients that need support for eating, make sure that there is someone from the family or friends that know they should assist under traumatic situation. They usually do it anyway, but maybe it's good to let them notice that even if the situation is very traumatic, the eating disorder stays, it doesn't go anywhere, and the people with eating disorder need more support. So even if the family is now traumatized, even if the family is under a lot of stress, it is very hard for them. They do need support. So the families should know that. And this is the end of my presentation. Now you can see me, right?
Yes, thanks a lot, Michael. As I said at the beginning, you are wonderful. You introduce a very profound topic in a way that is so emotionally important also for us, that if I can, I want to present my support, because professional in this field today is very hard to do. To discuss with you in this webinar, there are also two other speakers. Elissa Meyer. She was the CEO of the Academy of Eating Disorder. She's a very important general manager in many agencies. She has an enormous experience, international experience. And Lia Manzato, she's a psychiatrist. She leads a service in the city of Ferrara, and she is member of the board of the European chapter. So if you have some comment, Lisa and Emilia.
I would just say, bravo, Mikhail. This is a perfect presentation of an extremely difficult subject. And I heard that there is active warfare going on in 59 countries. We talked a bit before we started the seminar, but the world is focused right now on Israel and on the Ukraine, but there's conflict everywhere. And the percent of, even in the United States, where we have political wars going on, oh my goodness, but no physical war, but even the political wars have a traumatic impact on people. And when you feel like you can't trust your neighbors, you don't know what they're thinking. And so what the work that you're doing, I cannot applaud you enough and thank you enough for I'm going to cry just talking to you. It's just amazing. Brilliant presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It is
And you, Leah, you have
challenging.
some questions or some comments, Leah?
Yes, I say that it was a shock, the report from Michael, because we don't know really what is happening when you are inside a war situation. I'd like to add some suggestion about how many important is to talk about this situation. I think about my patients, overall my adolescents. They are living a traumatic situation. It is a traumatic period, but it is a long traumatic period because they lived the pandemic, COVID-19 pandemic. Since 2020, we are in traumatic situations. Then there was the onset of the Ukraine war. But and they see the images of these situations. And I add also that they see the images of, I think about adolescent, the female adolescents, the young girl. They see the images of the young girl killed in Afghanistan, or in my country, there is a long series of women killed by their partner. Since the first of this year, we have 10 women, because we had 2 more women killed yesterday. And I think this is traumatic. And we know that from psychological point of view, trauma is something very hard to manage. And the trauma interferes with the possibility to build a safe, stable relationship. The trauma is present, the link of trauma with eating disorders is well known since the last century, but in the last century, we talk about trauma in the interpersonal situation. Now we have to talk the trauma worldwide, traumatic situation. And I think, and I'd like to underline that as therapists, we have to pay attention to the link of eating disorders to the traumatic situation. We have to read the symptoms in a wider way. And furthermore, we have to take the chance to talk and to listen to our adolescents, because I notice that in my clinical practice, the young people present more anxiety symptoms, more thought of death, more fear of future. And I think we are therapists of eating disorders, but we have to give space to this fear, because we have to help our adolescents to face this traumatic situation. It is far from the terrible situation of
Computer freeze.
You lose the
Leah,
line, Lilia. But perhaps Michael, you can answer, you can comment what are saying Leah.
Yeah, I have to say that I think the main thing that trauma does, it makes us feel unsafe anywhere, because we know that everything can happen now. If we have like defense mechanism of denial and we said, okay, it's not going to happen to me, I'm going to be fine. And when you have trauma, then you know that everything can happen to you now. And you have to live under this very, very gray cloud, and it walks with you, and you just don't know when it's going to start raining. You know it's going to happen, you just don't know when or where, and you have to live with that feeling all the time, and you can't feel safe, and you feel useless, and you feel that, okay, it's going to happen, and there is nothing I can do to avoid it. And I think this is the main effect of trauma. The loss of control and the loss of the ability to feel safe.
Yep.
And it takes years, and every little trigger brings you back there. In this war, I am not living for now in a very attacked zone. But in 2006, I was living near Haifa, and we were attacked all the time. I had to leave my house for a few weeks because it wasn't safe. And a rocket hit in my neighbor house. And I still remember that it's been more than 17 years now, and I remember it very well. This is not something you forget. You take it with you for the rest of your life. And it's very easy to bring it back. You don't need a lot of triggers.
You know, one
Right.
more thing. Oh, I'm sorry, Mikhail, but one more point I meant to make is that it's so important right now, and this conversation this morning clearly illustrates it. It's so important that we take care of each other and that we work together, because the stress that is being felt by the professionals trying to cope, trying to be helpful, is enormous. And we need to model kindness and fellowship and support for each other so that we can all be stronger in helping the patients.
This is very, very important, because if you feel scared and you also feel that people blame you or people don't want to talk to you, it makes it much harder, because this is difficult enough without politics and other issues. And it gets terrible when you say, okay, I'm afraid, I don't know what to do, and I can't talk to anyone. So I do believe that as long as we can speak about it, we are better people, better professionals. Maybe it brings some hope.
Sure. Sure. I want to ask you something, because I'm interested to understand if someone support the leader of the team, because they have to manage other professionals and receive an enormous quantity of stress by the clients. And there are some kind of special supervision, or how you offer some, you can say between brackets, well-being to professionals, because they have to face this kind of stress, and so they have to maintain control.
Yes, it is. It helps when we have supervision or short seminars. We did have that a lot in the first few weeks. We still have some of it now, because we as therapists need a lot of support to continue and handling it. As I said, we all have secondary trauma. Even if we weren't there, we hear terrible stories and we go to sleep with those stories and with those images. So we do need some supervision, and we do need some place to ventilize our own emotions, because we still walk, we are still therapists.
In the Google
Umberto, I'm sorry to interrupt again, but Lynette has posted what looks like an important question. Lynette, would you like to share that? Oh, you're on mute. Lynette, you're on mute. Yeah. There.
Sorry. First of all, I'd like to say to Michal, thank you so much for a really, I agree with Umberto, very moving presentation. I have relatives in Israel who I'm in touch with daily, and I know how difficult the situation is. And I really appreciate everything you've said about working in that context. I just wanted to mention that Robert Leahy, who's a cognitive behavior therapist, you probably heard of him, who's the director of the American Institute for Cognitive Therapy in New York. gave a very good presentation. I think it was last year, maybe it was 2 years ago now, aimed at people in Ukraine who are affected by war. And he is a specialist on anxiety in particular, so he's not an eating disorder specialist at all. But I think what he had to say could be potentially interesting for you, and he has posted the talk on YouTube. So I put the link in the chat.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I can see it.
It's a
Okay,
pleasure.
maybe we can.
It's,
Yeah,
it's
maybe we
very,
can
very
watch it
sad that
later.
we have to share these kind of resources, but
Yeah.
at least if people are working on the same themes, it can be helpful to each other.
No, it's surely it's sad, but we need to stay together, and so we need to share solidarity.
Yes.
To produce a stronger network to face this kind of enormous social stress.
Yeah.
I want to ask Michael, because hope in neuroscience today, we know it's an important ingredient to the effective therapy. How we can share hope in so conflictive condition?
I don't know. There are days that I can't keep any hope, and there are better days in which I can have some hope. I don't know. Sometimes it's just the weather, and sometimes maybe we have a quiet day. Sometimes I can just deal with my daily things, and then I have more hope, and then something happens, and then I lose hope. And I go up and down all the time. This is my experience. I don't know if everyone feels that
No,
way,
but
but
your
this is my
experience is
experience.
enormous. Your experience is
No,
are
I can call it like a very cautious optimism. Like you have to be real about the facts, but you have to keep hope and to be a little bit optimistic, because you know we are human beings, and hopefully our leader will be wise enough to find solutions. But we are the small people. We are therapists, and we have to struggle in this situation. But you know, as Michal said, you know, I'm older than Michal. I know her for many years. And what I can say, I was always optimistic. You know, she knows me. Always, you know, we went through such a hard time. We were therapists through many wars. But this situation is the hardest of all. The hardest of all, because we don't feel safe. So, and when you don't feel safe, it's very hard to keep the hope. So what I'm saying is you have to be optimistic, but be very cautious.
Yeah, absolutely. As always, the mental health is to be real in the environment.
To keep reality, yes.
In the reality always. Yael, she is the vice president of the European chapter, also as a professor of the Haifa University, but she is vice president of the European chapter. No, the question about hope is important, because otherwise, without hope, you have to work day by day. And so it's difficult to imagine a therapy plan, no? Because when we have some patient, we have a diagnosis, and we, because our experience, our knowledge, we have in our mind almost the prognosis, and so what we want to reach thanks to treatment. But without hope, it's very difficult, because you live day by day inside the uncertainty, no? And so it's a care system very fluid, very unpredictable. Is it true? You think in the same way, Michael?
Thank you, Michal. It was amazing. It was amazing.
You
presented, you know.
I have to say, I don't know what's going to happen, and it does make me think, not just me, about what's important. Am I going to fight with my children so they go to sleep or get up or make their room? What's the meaning of that? Why do I care so much? If they make up their rooms, they just bury their friends. So what the hell? let them keep the room a mess. So it makes you think about everything differently. And you just, sometimes you don't know where to focus or where to put your attention. And you really try to keep some hope and some positive thoughts. And you have to tell them, okay, keep thinking about the future. Because if you don't think about the future, you do lose hope. So you have to be focused in the present and still think about the future. And it's always a balance. Like you have to find this balance every day.
Sure, you have
It
to just
affects
live by day.
everything.
I imagine. Leah, you want to conclude your intervention?
Yes, I'd like to add something because Yael is right. We are adults. We have to give hope. And it is terrible when we are also traumatized. But as parents, as a therapist, as adults, we have to maintain the hope because the next generation should be better than our generation, because not everybody are linked with aggressivity, but they are linked with the possibility to trust in the future. And as a therapist of eating disorders, we are the lucky to be together in a multidisciplinary team. So this is a good luck because we can support each other. Even in a traumatic situation, it is very difficult, I know, but we have to maintain the hope because hope is the possibility to maintain a mental life in our generation.
Yes.
Do you have some comments, Mikkel?
I don't know. I think this is all true because I do believe that as long as we can speak about it, we have hope. I lose hope when I feel that I can't speak or that there are people who can't listen, and I'm always open to listen and hear other people and other experiences. And I think what scares me most is that people feel that there is no point of talking or listening, and this blocks everything. So I really do hope that things will change. I don't know. It is very confusing to me too.
You are very human, very human.
Very human.
Yeah, no, because your heart is open, and so thanks a lot. No, I remember now that at the last Congress of the APA, the American Psychological Association, it arrives in the last August. The final words were resist and enjoy. Why? Resist because there's the world so chaotic, so polarized, and so the conflicts are everywhere. And so you have to face this kind of problematic that is without border. Perhaps it arrives in your houses day by day, but you have to enjoy. Enjoy, it means that you are engaged in your job and you know that what you are doing is very, very important, Mikkel. Absolutely important. This is the presence that help the other people to face this kind of stressful period. And so
I can only hope.
and enjoy.
I can only hope this is true. Sometimes I feel I don't help people at all because sometimes I feel just
too
as
much.
useless as they feel. I feel like I can't help them. People have like terrible stories, and I feel okay. I can't help them.
But you can, and you are, Mikhail.
Yeah,
you can and you are.
I try to say, okay, now maybe look at it differently. I'm here with you, but I can't bring your house back and I can't bring your friends back. We can't do this.
One of my life philosophies is that at any moment in time, there are wonderful things happening and there are terrible things happening. And you can't focus on both of them at the same time. So you have to choose to focus on the positive, on the constructive things that you're doing. And I'm so proud of you, all of you.
Exactly.
Oh, I'm embarrassed.
Okay. I want to thank another time Mika for her presentation. It's so precise, so important. It's a master field for us, because in the world where there are the risk day by day, your experience is a pioneering for everybody. And so you are our pioneer. Thanks a lot. Everybody can look this webinar because it's on demand inside the web page of the European chapter. I want to remember that March 10 should be the international conference, pre-ICIT conference, with the Hispano-Latino American chapter and the Middle East chapter together with the European chapter. And so see you again on March 10 afternoon. Thanks again, Mikel. Your presentation was very, very important. And I want to share to you my feeling to be part of your battle day by day. Thanks.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak and show you.
We are with you.
Thank you.
Ciao.
Thank
See you again. Ciao.
you.
Thank you, everyone, for coming. And it'll be online in a couple of days.
Okay.